So today we're going to focus on special ideas. And we're going to talk about Alekhine idea, we're going to talk about Botvinnik idea and Spassky idea. Who knows who was Alexander Alekhine? Raise your hands. Who heard this name? Okay, John, what can you tell us about Alexander Alekhine? Let us say, first of all, that he was the world champion, Alexander Alekhine. And who knows what number? Number 4 was Alexander Alekhine. So he was the world champion, and it speaks for himself that his ideas, that's why we're still using his ideas, right? So once we get closer to the position that in which we can use his ideas, I will explain more. So let us start with the opening. So knight f3, d5, c4, and d4. So who knows the name of this opening? Raise your hands. Go ahead. This is Slav defense. Knight f6 and knight c3. So exactly Slav defense. So cat. How do you say it? Slav. Slav or Slav? Slav. S-L-A-V. Right. Slav. So Catalan is with g3 when the pawn goes from g2 to g3 and another pawn structure with blacks. So this is exactly Slav defense. Knight b d7. Okay, let us stop at this point. Alekhine created the idea that in this type of positions, when the pawn structure is undefined, when the pawn is on d5 and on c6, and white can take, or reverse maybe black, so with the same pawn structure, can take on d5 here, and then you will be forced to take with the pawn from c6 to d5, and your knight is on d7 already, then it's not really good. So it's better when the pawn structure is defined and cx d5, cx d5, to develop your knight to c6 instead of d7. That was his idea. So we will see why that works. So takes, and now you see the knight on d7 is not that active as if the knight was on c6. Do you agree with me? So that's why when you play with white, these positions, raise your hands who plays d4. One, so the rest play e4, right? Say it again? Okay, well, but I think that for chess education that will be good to know. So if you play d4 and you go to the Slav variations, know that if your opponent develops the knight to d7, you can just take on d5, and then the knight on d7 will be doing nothing. It will be less active. Bishop f4, so this is still an opening going on, so just normal development. h3, because if the knight moves to h5, we want to save the bishop from f4. Did you get that? So h3 and b5. Castle, bishop b7, and now a4. Why do we play a4? Who has any ideas? Jason, what do you think? Why do I play a4?
Try to immediately win a pawn, or try to open up the a-file.
Right, we want to undermine the pawn chain, and the best idea how you can undermine the pawn chain is from the beginning. You cannot undermine from a6 because we do not have this additional file, right? So that's why you undermine it from a4. Then b4. What moves are possible here? Aikas.
Knight to e2.
Knight to e2. Katie?
Knight to b1 or a2.
Knight to b1 or a2. So basically we have 3 moves. What do you think? What was the next move? Say it again?
You go knight to c1 to d3.
Knight to e2 or knight to 8?
a2 to c1 to d3.
Okay, that's a good idea, which is possible here. So knight can move to a2, then knight moves to c1 and to b3. Do I need to show it to you, or you calculate it? Good. In the game, white played knight to e2. Well, basically you save the same idea. You can still move to c1 and to b3, but knight is closer to the center. Rook c8. This is logical. Because when we have the open file, what do we do with this file?
Want to fill it in a sense bubble.
We want to control. That's why black controls. a5. a5 is the move which I will ask you. What is the idea behind a5?
Prevents black playing a5.
This is first idea, and what is second? Raise your hands if you have. Katy?
It leaves that b pawn undefended.
Very good. And one more. Any ideas? Jason?
It takes away a square for the knight on b7.
It controls b6. So do you remember the beginning of our conversation when we said that the knight on d7 will not be that well developed? And after playing a5, so as Katy said, we'll leave the pawn on b4. Let us say it's almost isolated because the pawn on a6 is too far, it cannot protect. Then Jason, you said that we control b6 and not allow the knight from d7 to move to b6 and then move to c4. Also, what else after playing a5? What else do we do? We do not allow black to move a5 by himself and to protect b4 and to control more space. Castle, knight c1. So you see this idea that the knight is going to b3 one time. Rook c6 and knight to b3. So basically we have the entire control of the queen side without even putting the rooks on the c file, right? So our bishop controls c4, c2, the knight controls c5, the pawn controls c5, the pawn from a5 controls b6. So we control the entire side. What can you tell me about the bishop on b7? Is it good enough? John, what do you think about the bishop?
Lose.
It's like a pawn, right? Just it's not participating. And queen a8. What does black want to do after queen a8? Like future plan. Azim?
Black has somehow got to get that, open that diagonal with, with the d.
Correct. So d5 pawn, well, from the first view, you have the opinion that what is black doing? The bishop is on b7, the queen goes to a8, and they all are stuck with the pawn on d5. So first idea is to open c8 for another rook. And like another idea, maybe the situation will happen that black will be able to open the diagonal. So to push the pawn from e6 to e5 somehow and open this diagonal. Of course, it's not easy, but behind queen a8, there are two ideas. Knight e5. So white doesn't want black to move e5 in no way. No way you want to open that diagonal. Knight takes, bishop takes, and then f6. From the from this standpoint, you think that, well, maybe black will manage to move the pawn to e5 and open the position. Bishop f4. Let's calculate. If black plays e5, is it good? Or will it change anything? And how will you react? So now this is the assignment for you. Write me the white's move. You have papers, you have pencils. Write down the move. So the main lines that you wrote were d4 x e5, f x e5, and bishop x e5. I think this is the simplest way. So d4 is impossible because the knight is hanging on e4. The other variation that you wrote was bishop h2, which also has the right to exist, because you got the idea. You didn't want to open the diagonal, right? When bishop goes to h2 and pawn takes on d4, then knight takes on d4, and the bishop on b7 and the queen on a8, they're just stuck. The other variation that I liked also, it was bishop takes e4. So what is the idea? E5 cannot take on f4 because bishop takes on d5. Do you get the idea? Once you take on e4, you can take on e5. And what did we get from this variation? So we got that we still block the diagonal, but we got the extra pawn, and we opened the square for the knight. So the knight from b3 can move to d4. So that means e5 is a bad move. f5 happened in the game. f3. Let's get rid of this annoying knight that controls that many squares. Knight returns back to f6, and then g4. Look at this move. Instead of trying to play on the c file, where definitely black for now has certain pressure, like certain control with the rook on c6, and then bring the rook to c8, white mentioned that while the queen is on a8, the bishop on b7, rook is somewhere on c6, why don't we start the attack on the king side? Knight to d7, black doesn't want to take the pawn on g4, because if pawn takes on g4, with which pawn are you going to take, f or h? Azim?
F.
I think both, taking with both pawns is good. You can take with h pawn, it will be closer to the center, you will still control e4, and you will have h file to attack, so king to g2 and rook to h1 next. Taking with f pawn, this is another story from pawn structure. It's weaker because you separate the pawns and you create more pawn islands, but from the tactical point of view, you're going to place your bishop on e5, you're going to double the rooks on the f file and then play g5. Black has the weakness on e6, so this move is also possible. That's why black decided not to make that move and take on g4 and play knight to d7. Rook to c1. Again, white plays on both sides. He checked black whether black is going to take on g4, and if black took on g4, where was going white to play? Azim? If black took on g4 in this position, where was white going to play? What do you think?
F or H file with the rook.
So on the king side.
Yeah.
Since black stepped away with the knight to d7, we can transfer our forces to the queen side. Because on the king side everything is fine, but we do not want to touch anything yet. We want to force black to start exchanges first. Rook takes on c1, rook takes on c1, pawn takes on g4, and rook c7. Look at this tactics. Black took on g4 and expected white to take on g4 back, but instead white played rook c7, attacking the d7 knight, and after d7 the bishop on e7 is hanging. Pawn takes, queen takes, so at least black thinks, well, we have one extra pawn, maybe it will help us, but it didn't really help. So bishop moves back to c8. Look at black's position. It's inactive. Almost all the pieces are inactive, but you have to be careful. Once you sacrifice the pawn, well, sacrificing the pawn, this is the minimum what you can sacrifice. Am I right? However, once you sacrifice the pawn, you have to be careful and you have to be responsible for that sacrifice. And therefore, you have to be very active. Queen to h5 attacking. h7 is hanging. What will be your next move? Write down. Okay, let's go forward and see what happened in the game. Who was thinking about these moves? Raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, not bad. What the rest of the team was reviewing? What were you reviewing? Tell me the other moves. John?
Queen G5.
Queen G5. Jason? What?
I actually thought
Bishop takes H7.
Queen H4.
Queen H4. But Bishop H7 looks so natural, right? If knight takes, what is the next move, Katie?
I'm not sure.
But you wrote this Bishop H7.
I was working through it. I wasn't this far yet.
Okay. So if knight takes on H7, what is the next move, Azim?
Rook takes.
Rook takes E7.
Yeah.
King to H8. What do we do next? It's not writing assignment, just raise your hands and tell me what you're going to do next. Azim?
Queen to H4.
Queen to H4, correct. Bishop D8. Okay, it's time to sacrifice. Rook G7, right? This is this move that comes to our mind first. Go ahead. Jason, your move. What's next? What do I do next? How can we checkmate? Because we sacrificed the rook. Raise your hands. Just everybody. I want everybody to participate. We're not sleeping in this class.
Queen H6.
Queen H6. Good. King to F7. Katie?
Queen to G6.
First bishop to D6. Why? Queen to G6 will be the next move, but first you have to take E7 under control. Otherwise, after Queen to G6, Azim, what will be black's move? King?
No choice. He has to go to
King to E7, correct. And then the king moves further and further to D7 and runs to the queen side, but we're not interested in that. So that's why bishop goes to D6. Right. The rook goes to G8, check. Bishop takes, king takes, check. Any ideas? Take the bishop, Azim, you're right. If you do not see the mate right away with Tempe, take the material back. And you have one extra pawn right now. You're attacking, you're close to winning. Queen C6, black tries to awake. Check. Who wants to tell the next move? Queen G7, correct. Next move?
Queen G4.
Bishop F4 first. Queen G4, then King H6. And then again, you have to give the check back. King returns back. So after Bishop F4, we want to play Queen H6, and I do not see any defense. How did you like the game? So from the very beginning, the mistake was made when White played the knight to D7, right? It was the rush. And White reacted correctly, took on D5, and that knight basically spoiled many things in Black's development, right? So imagine the knight instead of D7 on C6, the situation will be completely different. Good. Let's go to the next game, to the next position. This is Spassky's idea. This will be a writing assignment. So White to play and write me your move. Just one move I need from you. after that, I will explain you Spassky's idea. Almost everybody wrote G4. I got your idea. That's really good that you got that idea. You wanted to prevent the knight from going to f5, right? You wanted to extend the control. Another move was bishop to c5, which was also good, and bishop g7, which I think doesn't make any sense because your bishop is too strong. And now getting closer to Spassky's idea. By the way, the good question, do you know Boris Spassky? Have you heard about him, Katie? What do you know about Boris
World
Spassky?
champion before Bobby Fischer.
Right. Speaking about Boris Spassky, if you want, you can go to the Chess Hall of Fame, and they have, well, just an amazing exhibition of Jacqueline Petigorsky, who was the great organizer of the Grandmaster tournaments in California, and she was really close to become United States champion, but she never got the title, but she participated in the championships many times. And Boris Spassky played against Bobby Fischer, and she was also there at those events. So you can go there and just see the picture of Boris Spassky, and actually you can see his real score sheet, like, I mean, handwriting, how he was writing. Okay, but we're going to talk about a different story. The move that I'm going to show you is bishop a7. That was Spassky's idea. So you block the file when you have two rooks opposing each other, and you want to double the rooks on that file. So in this concrete situation, we want to double the rooks on the A file. Am I right?
Right.
But without moving the bishop to A7, how can we double the rooks? We can't, right? How can we? Katie, do you have any idea how can we double the rooks without playing bishop A7? Right, so we can take on a8, rook takes on a8, then we can play rook a1, but still, this doesn't help us, it's just trading the pieces. So after bishop a7, what happens? You can double the rooks, so the next move will be rook a6, then rook a1, and you already have enough pieces there. But of course, be careful when your opponent can attack the bishop. If the rook wasn't on f8, but was on c8, then your opponent could have played rook c7, attacking the bishop. So when you play this type of positions. So knight moved to f5. Our move, rook a6. Rook protects the pawn. Rook a1. You see how easy we double the rooks, just knowing this maneuver. e5, the bishop returns back to c5. And then after this, black has to do something with this a file. He cannot stay on the a file anymore, so he can either trade on a6 or step to b8. So for example, if he trades on a6, then you take back on a6, attacking c6 pawn, and the rook is attached to the pawn, and the knight cannot protect the pawn because the bishop on c5, that bishop that you guys wanted to trade, no way we're going to trade this bishop. He's so strong. The bishop controls e7, d6, d4. What are you going to do now? You're going to bring your king and pawn step by step, right? Okay, we're done with this position. Go into the next one. Again, Spassky's idea will be presented here, but this is a game. So we will start with the opening. Again, what is the name of this opening? We already saw it. Slav. Good job. And g3. So g3 is one of the deviations here. You can go g3. This is not Catalan. Catalan is different structure. Usually the pawn is not on c6, the pawn is on e6, and then Catalan happens. When the pawn is on c6, it is Slav, but g3 in Slav defense. Bishop f5, knight c3, queen b3, queen b6. Another typical idea when you have this opposition of the queens. do not be afraid in these type of positions to play c5. From one standpoint, you would say, well, why are we going to double the pawns on the b file? So the queen takes, and then we have this a2, b3 pawn. So b3, b2 pawns are doubled. Why do we have to do that? Who knows the answer? Katia, what do you think?
To double the pawns? Or
Why is it worse of doubling the pawns?
because it's
what-
harder to defend double pawns. It's a weaker structure.
So from one point of view, it's bad to have double pawns, but in this concrete situation, we're talking about this position. Why did we go for that? Who knows? John?
To open up the rook.
Correct. So thanks to this exchange of queens, we opened up the rook, and now the rook controls a file. What are we going to do with these double pawns? We're going to push the pawn from b3 till b5, and then we're going to get rid of this pawn. If black plays a6, then well, you will see it later in the game, so I'm not going to explain it right now. You will see it. Knight to e4, again typical knight h4 attacking the bishop. What is our next move? Azim?
I think you just pushed the pawn.
b4, correct. f3. You see how many maneuvers we're doing. The position is closed, and you have time with white to transfer your pieces. So the main battle is going to happen in the center and on the queen side, right? That's why we're bringing our pieces to the center. Knight to d3. It seems that bishop on b2 is doing nothing, but we can always try to bring the heir to the bishop by playing c4. So a5. In this position, in this game, black decided to play aggressively on the queen side, not to play a6 and just wait. So black played a5, trying to open up the a file and fight for it. King f8. So now we have the position, again, the position of two rooks, right? Rook on a8, rook on a1. And in my opinion, white is better. You can defend black, but I will tell you why I think white is better. So first of all, look at this pawn structure. The pawn on b7 is not protected by any other pawn, and the b6 is controlled by c5 pawn. Then you're going to push e4 maybe one day, or at least if you're going to fight for the a file, most likely that you will be able to use whose rule, whose idea? Spassky's idea. So we will see it later. b5. So the queen side is blocked, and only a file is open. So basically, all the fight is going to be held on the a file. You take, how do we call it? Everybody knows? En passant. Good. Knight takes on b6, knight c5. So that was the idea why we took on b6, right? Because the knight was already on d3. If bishop takes on d3, what will be your next move? Bishop takes on d3.
Push the pawn.
Push, right, Azim, you're right. So b7, that was the threat. The knight took on b6, and knight went to c5. Bishop e7, bishop a6 attacking the rook, rook c7. Let's stop here. Azim, tell me about this position, about bishop to a6. Spassky's idea, right? What does it allow us to do? Bishop a6.
Put the bishop on a6
Mm-hmm.
on b7.
No, we're not going to b7. we're going to double the rooks. So that is our idea. Rook a5 and rook a1. So now black can do nothing to change the situation on the a file because the bishop separates the rooks. But moreover, look at the b4 pawn and the rook on a5. The rook is protected by the pawn. That is another pro of this position, of this move bishop a6. So white moved the bishop to a6 because he understood that the b4 pawn would be protecting the rook on a5 and then the rook from a1. So rook on a5 has good protection. That's why your bishop can be free, right? Your bishop can freely move to b7 or turn back. Some maneuvers. And look at this. Look, bishop b5. Finally, black made a mistake. And bishop takes on c6. You see, because black was under the pressure. It was really hard to play all the game on the limited area with the limited space. And once you give your opponent to make a mistake, when everything is set up correct in your position, well, you have a good percentage that he will make that mistake. Rook takes on a5, knight returns back to c8, and this is just a matter of time when I'm going to win this game. And one more example. This is Botvinnik's idea. So Botvinnik's idea is a little bit different, but again, do you know who was Mikhail Botvinnik? He was the world champion too. So since we have the first two examples with world champions, I think that was easy to guess. And you see that being a world champion, that means something, since we used the ideas after so many years. So let's go through the opening quickly. This is another opening. This is, how do we call it? Queen's Gambit declined, right? Knight bd7, but here this is not about knight bd7. This is about the other story. I will tell you later when we counter that idea. So e3, c6, bishop d3. Oh, just typical Queen's Gambit declined. Normal development, e4. The main idea, if you do not play these lines, so keep in mind that e3 to e4, for example, if you play with black, you should know that for both sides, for black, the idea is e6, e5, for white, e3, e4. Knight takes, bishop takes, and queen c7. So black is going to play either c5 or e5. Queen to e2, and bishop f4. Bishop f4 trying to trade the bishops. Otherwise, well, right now knight g5 is not possible. But I'm thinking about do you know this idea of sacrifice of the bishop, bishop h7, then knight g5? Keep that in mind. We cannot play this right away because of the knight moves to f6. Knight protects this h7. But keep that in mind that this is possible. Maybe you will be able to catch one of your opponents one day. So bishop f4, queen takes f4, and rook d1. We are placing the pieces in the center, and the main pawn here is d4. d4 controls e5, d4 controls c5, and of course the bishop, the light squared bishop on the diagonal b1 h7. This is one of our major pieces here, I mean major attacking pieces. So rook b8. What is the goal of rook b8? John?
Play b5.
Oh, maybe one day b5, so just do not stay on this diagonal where the bishop is. Rook d2, we're going to double the rooks. Knight f6 attacking the bishop. Are we going to trade the bishop or are we going to run away? Azim?
Run away.
Run away, we need that guy. Queen c7, rook d1. Well, basically it's simple, right? We created an idea, we're going to play in the center on d file, we know the main pieces that we use here. And c5, like a very, very important moment because After c5, you have to define what you're going to do. Either you open the file, or you trade the pawn, or you just keep the pawn on d4. What do you think? What are we going to do here? Are we going to push the pawn to d5? Katy, what do you think?
I don't think so.
You don't think so? Why don't you think so? So let's calculate the line. So d5, ex d5, cx d5, and then what will be black's move?
I guess knight takes if it's black's move.
No, knight cannot take because rook will take the pawn. Do you see? So d5, take. You cannot take with the knight, you see? Because the rook takes. So if take, maybe queen d6 will be the move. And then b5. We do not have dark squared bishop, so it will be really hard to get rid of the queen on d6. Who is the best blocker of the pawn? Do you know?
The knight.
The knight. The queen is not the best, but here it works. What if we take on c5? Queen takes on c5. We control d-file. I think it's also a good idea. But this is the moment where we are going to talk about Botvinnik's idea. So Mikhail Botvinnik said that when you have the open file in the center, and you really want to get that file, one of the possibilities is trading. And here in this position, trading of queens. Unexpectedly, absolutely unexpectedly, queen e5. We calculated d5, we calculated c5, capturing on c5, even not reacting on c5, but queen e5. So the idea is we're going to open the file with tempo by trading the queens, because black lacks development. Queen takes, because queen has to take, the rook on b8 is hanging, otherwise you take with the pawn, of course, because we're interested in opening the file, and the knight moves back. Did it work for us? Trading for opening the file. So after that, knight moves to g5, attacking h7, and then rook d8. So you're going to crush your opponent because he doesn't have development. You're just trying to activate the pieces, but look at f6 square, that the knight goes to f6, and d6 square, they're so weak. I think maybe let's return back to this position after knight g5. If h6 happens, how can we play here?
Just put the knight on h2, h7.
Correct. And what happens? We will have one extra exchange, right? Good job, Azim. So g6, rook d8, b5, take, knight to c7, knight e4, knight d5. Write me your next move. Like a couple of moves. One move it won't be enough. Just a couple of moves. Your idea. Knight f6. Raise your hands who wrote that move. Okay, good job. So actually the majority saw that move. King g7. Katie, your line.
Rook
No?
takes rook. Yeah.
And knight, you wrote knight h7, right? But knight d5 is stronger. So instead, what happens if I take on f6 with the knight? And we threaten checkmate, so I play here. John, your next move? You have one extra pawn. You can trade, you can play rook d7, pinning the bishop, so a7 will be hanging, so if bishop moves somewhere, you can take on a7. So let's go with the game notation. So king g7, rook took, and knight took on d5. Took, bishop e6. What's your next move? Azim? Rook c5, easy. Bishop takes, then b3. How do you like it? King, yes, trapped. King e8, king f1, king d7, king e1. a6, of course, black wants to save his bishop. Take, rook takes, king to c3. And then king comes to b2. And what are you going to do next? Let me play with black. Katie, you move.
Rook c4.
Rook c4.
It drops the pawn, but then you play rook a4.
I take.
Oh, and that releases me.
No, it doesn't work. So that's why let's think. John, any ideas?
I'm going to play king b2.
King b2, right? Okay. We'll play f6, for example. Azim?
Take the pawn.
Jason? What do you have to do here? How are you going to win that bishop? You need to bring the rook to a1. This is the task. And then rook d1 and rook a1. And you're winning the bishop. Nothing special. So f6 was a bad move. Instead of f6, I should have just stayed on one place. But you can transfer. You can sacrifice e5, but get it in a different way. You can play rook c3. I take. Rook d3, rook d1, rook a1. So what did we learn today? John, what did you learn from today's lecture? So Alekhine ideas with the knight development, Spassky's ideas with the doubling the rooks by blocking the file, and Botvinnik's ideas trading the pieces for opening the file. Right? So 3 new ideas that hopefully you will be able to use in your game.